my loving partner just messaged me. I honestly require a pause, some quiet room to reflect and think. I calmly responded, take all the time you need. It was a quiet evening, the kind of evening where the world seems to pause and the only sound is the soft hum of distant traffic. My phone buzzed suddenly, pulling me from my thoughts. On the screen appeared a message from my loving partner. I honestly require a pause, some quiet room to reflect and think. I stared at the words, feeling a sudden cold wave of uncertainty. Each word seemed heavy with meaning, and I couldn't help but read it over and over. My mind raced through 1,000 scenarios, from small misunderstandings to fears of something far worse. I wanted to reach out immediately, to ask why, to beg for reassurance, but I stopped myself. Instead, I took a deep breath and typed the only thing that felt right. Take all the time you need. The reply was simple, gentle, supportive, but my heart felt a storm of confusion and worry. I put the phone down and tried to focus on other things, but my thoughts kept circling back. I replayed our recent conversations, wondering if I had said something wrong, if I had neglected a feeling, or if this pause meant something more permanent than I wanted to imagine. Hours passed. I walked around my apartment, made a cup of tea, and tried to distract myself with music and books. Yet, every little sound, every vibration from my phone, made my heart leap. I realized that giving someone space wasn't easy. It felt like standing on the edge of a cliff, not knowing whether the ground would hold or crumble beneath you. Then I remembered why I loved this person in the first place. Their honesty, their depth of thought, their need to process emotions carefully. I reminded myself that sometimes love isn't about constant closeness but about patience, understanding, and giving the other person the freedom to reflect. By the end of the night, I felt a quiet kind of hope. The pause didn't feel like an end but like a chance for clarity, growth, and perhaps even a deeper connection when my partner returned. And so I kept my phone close, but my heart steady, trusting that love often speaks most clearly in moments of silence. It was late into the night now. The apartment was silent except for the occasional hum of the refrigerator and the distant murmur of traffic outside. I sat on the edge of my couch, my phone still glowing softly on the coffee table. The words from my partner's message echoed in my mind. I honestly require a pause, some quiet room to reflect and think. Each time I thought of them, a mix of concern, longing, and hope swirled inside me, creating a restless storm I couldn't calm. I leaned back, closing my eyes, and let my memories drift. I remembered the first time we had met, how their laughter had felt like sunlight spilling across a gloomy day. I remembered the late-night conversations, the tiny gestures of care, the way they always seemed to know when I needed comfort. All of these moments, bright and tender, now felt fragile, as if they were balanced on the edge of uncertainty. I thought about why they might need this pause. Maybe they were overwhelmed with work, or perhaps life had thrown them too many small pressures all at once. Perhaps it wasn't about me at all but about their own journey, their own need to find clarity within themselves. Even as anxiety gnawed at me, I reminded myself that love isn't possession. Love is patience. Love is allowing the other person the space to breathe, to reflect, to exist without pressure. The hours crept forward slowly. I made tea, watched the steam rise in soft spirals, and tried to occupy my mind with a book. But my eyes kept drifting back to the phone. I imagined them sitting somewhere, maybe staring at the ceiling, maybe pacing the floor, feeling the same swirl of emotions that I did. I pictured their fingers hovering over their own phone, unsure whether to reach out or to retreat further into thought. As the night deepened, memories of small arguments and misunderstandings crept in. I remembered times when I had been impatient, when I had failed to listen properly, and guilt weighed on me like a stone in my chest. I whispered apologies into the empty room, as if saying them aloud could somehow reach them. I thought about all the times we had promised to be honest, to support each other, and I felt a renewed sense of determination. If they needed space, I would give it, but I would also be ready, fully present, whenever they returned. Sleep didn't come easily. I found myself wandering from room to room, touching objects that held memories of us. The photo from our first trip together, the little trinkets we had bought for each other, the blanket we shared on cold nights. Each item reminded me of the love we had built, and though worry still lingered, it was tempered by gratitude. Love, I realized, wasn't just about constant closeness. It was about remembering the shared history, cherishing the bond, and trusting in the connection even when physically apart. By early morning, a strange calm had settled over me. The city outside was quieter now, the sky just beginning to lighten. I sat by the window, staring at the pale blue horizon, and allowed myself to hope. Perhaps this pause would bring clarity. Perhaps it would strengthen us in ways that constant closeness never could. I imagined the moment when my partner would finally message again, their words filled with understanding, and I would be ready with patience and care, ready to listen and support without judgment. In that long night of reflection, I realized something important. Love isn't measured by immediate answers or constant contact. Love is measured by trust, by giving the other person room to breathe, to think, to grow. And as the first rays of morning sunlight spilled across the room, I felt a quiet strength within me. No matter how uncertain the pause might be, I knew that giving space was itself an act of love. Even as the hours stretched on, I remained seated by the window, my mind wandering through possibilities, memories, and hopes. And in that space of reflection, I understood something fundamental. Sometimes, the greatest way to say, "I love you," is to simply say, "Take all the time you need." The morning light grew stronger, illuminating the corners of the apartment that had been shadowed all night. I sat there, drinking the last of my tea, and thought about the small moments that had defined our relationship. I remembered the rainy afternoon when we had gotten caught in a sudden downpour, laughing as we ran for cover under a tiny awning. I remembered the late-night kitchen conversations about dreams, fears, and secrets we had shared with each other. Every memory felt vivid, almost tangible, as though they were little threads weaving a tapestry that defined us. I couldn't help but wonder how my partner was feeling. Were they walking through the streets of the city, head down, lost in thought? Were they curled up with a blanket, staring at the ceiling, feeling the weight of their own emotions? I imagined them pacing, scribbling notes in a journal, or perhaps simply staring at nothing, trying to untangle the complicated knots of life in their mind. The thought of them, vulnerable yet thoughtful, filled me with a mix of tenderness and worry. I also reflected on my own need for patience. How often had I been too hasty, too impulsive, wanting answers before they were ready to give them? How often had I felt the urge to fix things immediately, rather than allowing them to process naturally? Tonight, I realized, giving space wasn't a sign of weakness or passivity, it was an expression of trust and respect. By allowing them the time to reflect, I was honoring not just their needs but the depth of our connection. Hours passed slowly. I wandered from the living room to the kitchen, then to the bedroom, touching objects that carried memories of our time together. The small mug they had gifted me, the worn-out book we had read together, the blanket that had kept us warm on countless nights, they all reminded me that our relationship wasn't just built on moments of joy, but also on understanding, patience, and silent support. I began to think about the future, and for the first time that night, a sense of calm began to settle over me. I imagined the conversation we would have when they were ready, how we would sit together, sharing thoughts and feelings without judgment, understanding without anger, and embracing the vulnerability that comes with honesty. I knew that this pause could become a turning point, a moment that deepened our bond rather than weakening it. As the day progressed, I felt a quiet strength growing inside me. I realized that love often manifests in unexpected ways. Sometimes it is loud and demonstrative, filled with words and gestures. Other times, it is quiet, patient, and almost invisible, present in the act of waiting, listening, and trusting. I felt proud of my own ability to embrace this quieter form of love, to trust in the resilience of our connection. By late afternoon, the sunlight streamed through the windows in golden beams. I took a deep breath and allowed myself to imagine the first message from my partner once they were ready. Would it be full of reassurance? Would it express the insights they had gained during their reflection? I didn't know, and yet, strangely, that uncertainty no longer terrified me. I understood that love isn't about certainty, it's about faith, care, and presence, even in absence. I thought again about that simple phrase I had sent. Take all the time you need. It wasn't just a message, it was a promise. A promise that I would be here, patient and understanding, no matter how long the pause lasted. It was a declaration of trust in both my partner and the love we had cultivated together over countless shared moments. Evening approached, and I found myself sitting by the window once more. The city was bathed in amber light, shadows stretching long across the streets. I felt the quiet hum of life outside and the comforting stillness inside. I realized that this pause, however challenging, had given me the gift of reflection. It had allowed me to understand the depth of my feelings, the importance of patience, and the true meaning of love as a balance of closeness and space. In that quiet, golden light, I closed my eyes and let a deep sense of hope fill me. No matter what the next message might say, I knew one thing with absolute certainty: love was not measured in immediacy or control, but in trust, patience, and the courage to allow someone the freedom to think and feel. And in giving that freedom, I was showing the truest form of love I could offer. Night came again, and the apartment was cloaked in the quiet hush of darkness. The soft glow of the streetlights outside filtered through the curtains, casting long, gentle shadows across the room. I sat by the window, my phone in my hand, staring at it as though it might magically reveal their thoughts before they were ready to share them. Each vibration of a notification made my heart skip, but I reminded myself to stay calm. Patience, I told myself. Patience and trust. I thought about the last time we had laughed uncontrollably together, curled up on the couch with a movie either of us could actually focus on. I remembered the way their hand had found mine in the dark, a quiet, unspoken affirmation that we were in this together. That memory now felt bittersweet, a reminder of both comfort and the uncertainty that had crept in with their request for space. I began to write in my journal, pouring out the swirl of thoughts and emotions that had been building all day. I wrote about my fears, my hopes, and my unwavering desire for them to find clarity and peace. As the ink spread across the pages, I felt a small sense of release. It was as if by articulating my feelings, I was honoring both my own emotions and theirs, giving them the room to breathe while keeping my love alive and present. Then my mind wandered to their perspective. What were they feeling in this very moment? Were they wrestling with doubts, uncertainties, or fears? Or were they finding the clarity they sought, slowly untangling the threads of their thoughts? I imagined them sitting in a quiet room, the world muted around them, allowing themselves to exist fully in reflection. I felt a pang of longing, but also a swell of admiration. Their courage to pause, to reflect, and to be honest about their needs was a profound act of strength, and I knew I had to match it with patience and understanding. Hours slipped by unnoticed. I made tea again, this time letting the warm liquid comfort my racing thoughts. I wandered around the apartment, touching objects that carried memories of us: the coffee mug they had given me, the notebook filled with shared sketches and notes, the blanket we had fought over playfully many nights ago. Each item was a thread in the tapestry of our relationship, a reminder of moments built on laughter, honesty, and quiet support. As midnight approached, I felt a sense of resolve settle in. I realized that this pause was not a threat, but a gift. It was an opportunity for growth, both for them and for me. I thought about how often we rush through life, how rarely we take the time to truly reflect and understand our own feelings. This pause was a chance to slow down, to appreciate the depth of our connection, and to strengthen it in ways constant closeness never could. I closed my eyes and let myself drift into memories of our shared past, our first trip together, the tiny moments of tenderness, the evenings spent talking about dreams and fears. Each memory was vivid, a reminder that love was more than words or actions. It was the continuous thread of presence, understanding, and care that connected us across time and space. And then I imagined the moment when they would finally return, when their thoughts were sorted and their heart at peace. I pictured us sitting together, talking softly, sharing insights, and embracing the vulnerability that comes with honesty. I would listen, support, and cherish them with the patience I had cultivated during this long night. I would meet their pause with understanding, their reflection with empathy, and their honesty with love. In the deep silence of the night, I understood something essential. Love is not possession. Love is not urgency. Love is not control. Love is patience, trust, and the willingness to allow someone the space to think, to feel, and to grow. By giving them this space, I was showing the truest, purest form of love I could offer. I sat there, enveloped in the soft glow of the streetlights, feeling a quiet strength settle within me. And though the pause stretched on, uncertain and uneasy, I no longer feared it. I embraced it, for I knew that love, patient and steadfast, could endure anything, even distance, even silence, even the unknown. And in that quiet, reflective night, I whispered softly into the stillness, more to myself than anyone else, "Take all the time you need. I'll be here when you return." The next morning, a soft gray light seeped through the curtains. I sat on the edge of the bed, wrapped in the quiet solitude of the room. Last night's reflections had left me calmer, more patient, yet a gentle ache remained, a longing for connection, a desire to hear from them, to know they were okay. I held my phone loosely in my hand, not expecting any message yet, understanding that this pause was necessary. I thought about the countless conversations we had shared over the years, the arguments that ended in laughter, the late nights spent untangling complex emotions together. Each memory was a reminder that our relationship had always been built on honesty, trust, and vulnerability. This pause, difficult as it was, fit into that same pattern. It was a moment of honesty, a chance to confront feelings deeply, without distractions. In my mind, I imagined my partner sitting somewhere, perhaps on a park bench, staring at the bare branches of trees swaying in the winter wind. Were they thinking of me, or were their thoughts entirely inward, grappling with fears and hopes, dreams and doubts? I pictured them pausing at a coffee shop, absent-mindedly tracing the rim of a cup, lost in reflection. I felt a pang of longing but also a swell of admiration for their courage. It took strength to ask for space, to seek clarity, and I wanted to honor that strength fully. I began pacing the apartment, feeling restless but also thoughtful. I ran my hands over objects that held memories. Our first shared notebook, filled with sketches and tiny notes, the blanket we always fought playfully over, the mug they had given me, chipped slightly at the rim, yet perfect because it carried their presence. Every object reminded me that our love wasn't fragile. It was resilient, built over years of small, meaningful moments. At some point, I sank back onto the couch, closing my eyes, and let myself drift into memories of us traveling together. I remembered the time we had gotten lost in a winding alley of an unfamiliar city, laughing as we tried to navigate with a barely legible map. I remembered the nights we had stayed up talking about hopes and fears, the way our hands would always find each other, even in the dark. Each memory was a reassurance that even if we were temporarily apart, the bond we shared was unbreakable. Hours turned into evening. The city outside glowed with the warm light of street lamps and shop windows, reflecting softly on wet streets from an afternoon drizzle. I imagined my partner walking those same streets, perhaps feeling the same longing, the same mixture of hope and worry. I whispered into the quiet room, "Take all the time you need. I'll be here." And in saying it, I realized how powerful those words were, not just a reassurance for them, but a promise to myself to remain patient, understanding, and steadfast. The night deepened. I lay on the couch, staring at the ceiling, letting memories and reflections flow freely. I thought about what I had learned in this pause, that love is not measured in immediate answers, in constant presence, or in control. Love is patience. Love is trust. Love is the courage to step back and allow the person you care for to find clarity on their own terms. And in that realization, a calm settled over me. I pictured the moment we would reunite, when they would finally share their thoughts. I imagined sitting together, holding hands, sharing insights, laughing softly, crying gently, understanding each other more deeply than ever before. I realized that this pause, rather than weakening us, could strengthen us, making our love more resilient, more thoughtful, and more grounded in true understanding. And so I waited. I waited in quiet hope, in patient trust, in unwavering love. Even as the hours stretched on, uncertainty no longer felt frightening. I knew that love could endure silence, distance, and reflection. I whispered once more, softly, into the stillness. "Take all the time you need. I'll be here when you return. And when you do, we'll continue, stronger, wiser, and more in love than ever." Somewhere across the city, my partners sat alone in their small apartment, the evening light casting long shadows across the walls. Their fingers hovered over the phone, unsure whether to send a message or to remain in silence. The words, "I honestly require a pause, some quiet room to reflect and think," had felt both necessary and terrifying to write. It was an act of honesty, but also of vulnerability, laying bare the swirling storm of thoughts inside. They thought about the past weeks, the little arguments, the unspoken tensions, the moments when life had felt overwhelming. They loved me, they truly did, but they needed clarity, a moment to untangle their own emotions before attempting to navigate the relationship further. The fear of hurting me clashed with the need for self-reflection, creating a whirlwind of guilt, anxiety, and longing. Sitting by the window, staring at the bare trees swaying in the wind, they remembered the first time we met, how the laughter had felt like a sudden sunrise, warming the cold edges of life. They remembered the late-night talks, the quiet moments when no words were needed, the gentle touches that conveyed everything. Those memories were comforting, but they also made the decision harder. Asking for space felt like temporarily stepping away from warmth into uncertainty. They opened their journal, writing in careful, deliberate strokes. "I need clarity. I need to understand my heart. I need to make sure I am fully present, fully myself, before I can be fully present with them." Each word was a small release, a way to untangle the knots in their mind. They reread our past conversations, reflecting on moments of joy, tension, and unspoken words. The pause wasn't about distance, it was about truth, about preparing to love more wholly and openly. Time stretched on. They made tea, paced the small apartment, and imagined my face, wondering if I understood, if I worried, if I felt the same mixture of longing and hope. They thought about the first trip we took together, getting lost in an unfamiliar city, laughing as if the world had shrunk to just us. They remembered evenings lying side by side, hands intertwined, talking about fears and dreams. Those memories were anchors, reminders that love was resilient and worth patience. As night fell, they sat in quiet reflection, allowing themselves to confront fears they often ignored. What if the pause stretched too long? What if the distance changed something essential? And yet, beneath those fears, a deep trust persisted. Trust in me, trust in the bond we shared, trust in the patience and understanding that had always been part of our love. They closed their eyes and imagined the moment of return, sitting together, sharing truths and vulnerabilities, laughing, crying, holding each other with the quiet strength that only love forged through honesty could provide. The pause was not an end, it was preparation, a deep inhalation before the next chapter. And in the stillness of that night, they whispered softly into the silence. "I hope they understand. I hope they wait. I hope our love is strong enough to carry us through this pause. And when I return fully, we will be stronger, closer, and more ourselves than ever before." The next morning, the city was bathed in soft, golden light. I sat by the window, my hands wrapped around a warm mug, feeling a quiet anticipation. The past days of reflection, uncertainty, and longing had been difficult, but they had also strengthened something essential inside me: patience, trust, and an unwavering belief in the bond we shared. At the same time, across town, my partner stood at a quiet park, the cool morning air brushing against their face. The pause had given them clarity, a deep understanding of their own heart, and an even greater appreciation for the connection we shared. Their fingers brushed over the phone in their pocket, ready to reach out, yet savoring the final moments of reflection, knowing that every second had been meaningful. And then, finally, the message came. Short, simple, but filled with all the emotion words could not fully capture. "I'm ready now. Can we meet? My heart leapt. I typed back immediately, though my hands trembled slightly with excitement and relief. Yes. I've been waiting for you. We met in the quiet cafe where we had first spent hours talking late into the night. The moment our eyes met, a wave of relief and joy washed over us. There were no words needed at first, just the embrace, the closeness, the reassurance that love had endured even in silence and distance. We sat together, holding hands, sharing our reflections from the pause. They spoke about their thoughts, their fears, and the insights they had gained. I shared mine, the nights of reflection, the memories, the patience, and the hope I had held on to. With each word, our connection deepened, a renewed understanding forming between us. By the time we left the cafe, the world seemed brighter, more vivid. The pause had not been a moment of loss, but a bridge to something stronger, a love that had been tested by uncertainty and strengthened by patience, reflection, and mutual respect. We walked side by side, hands entwined, silently promising to carry the lessons learned from the pause into every moment of our future together. And in that quiet, golden morning, we both understood something profound. Love is not measured in constant proximity or instant answers. Love is patience, trust, understanding, and the courage to allow space for growth. And when hearts are patient and open, the reunion, when it comes, is all the more beautiful, all the more real. As we stepped into the sunlight together, I whispered softly, "Take all the time you need, and I'll always be here." They smiled, squeezing my hand gently, and replied, "And I'll always come back."